Good morning. Welcome to a special meeting of the Glendale City Council being called to order on May 11th at 9:04 p.m. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Asazarian.
Here.
Divine.
Here.
Pasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Brotman.
Here. And may we have your report, please?
The agenda for the Thursday, May 11th, 2023 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Tuesday, May 9th, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what's next?
Next is item 1, finance regarding fiscal year 2023-2024 budget study session. 2, public safety, fire and police, and Glendale Water and Power.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Galanian.
Yes, good morning, Mayor Brotman, members of City Council. Thank you for being here this morning. We're excited to delve into our budget study session number 2 out of a total of 6 budget study sessions. And just as a refresher, during the first study session, we covered the proposed general fund budget as well as the 5-year forecast. Starting today, or with today's session, we'll delve into individual departmental budgets. Again, as a refresher, last Tuesday, after a lengthy but fruitful discussion, this council adopted 4 priority areas that are financial sustainability, economic development, operational efficiency, mobility, traffic, and pedestrian safety. These 4 areas will help guide our priority-based budgeting for next year, as well as serve as a roadmap to deliver programs and projects to the community in alignment with your adopted priorities. As a precursor to today's and future budget study sessions, the presentation slide deck format for each department will look something like this, starting with the number of divisions within respective department or cost centers and personnel count. Then we'll cover the departmental budget with individual funds within that budget. And finally, a handful of departmental highlights. The departmental highlights slide, as was the case last year, and it was well received by the City Council, will cover how we will perform that function of whether it's a project, program, or initiative, what value it will bring to the community and the city, and how it will be funded. And of course, as is the case in majority of these highlights, related to one of the 4 council adopted priority areas. This year, we have made a slight change to the presentation on the budget for the department. We will show it in a graphical format versus the table that listed all the funds within that budget, and a comparison with last year. So I believe it's a marked improvement. So the overall departmental highlights will look like this, as I explained it previously. All right. So we'll start with public safety. There was actually a coin toss between Chief Ernst and Chief Sid, and Chief Sid won, so they get to go first. For the sake of efficiency, I would ask the mayor and council members, if at all possible, to hold your questions till the end of the presentation on that respective department for a better flow, and so that we can, if I'm not able to respond to those questions and need more detail, then I can call upon the department head to share more detail and respond to our questions. Let's get started. The police department, currently, they have 352 full-time, 352 and a half full-time equivalent and 13.65 full-time equivalent hourly positions. The proposal is to add 3 new positions to next year's budget. This would include public safety business assistant 2, investigative analyst, and in addition of a police lieutenant. This would bring the total to just over 370 personnel. The department is comprised of 5 divisions, starting with the Office of the Chief, and I'll briefly go over the responsibilities and the functions of each division. The Office of the Chief is involved in special events, filming permits, media and community relations, police foundation, police community advisory panel, and the volunteer program. Also provides administrative support to the command staff and all department personnel. In addition to the general counsel, who oversees risk management and provides legal services. Next is Administrative Services Division, comprised of 6 bureaus. Forensic Services Bureau, that includes the Verdugo Regional Crime Lab, that obviously provides services to local, regional, and federal law enforcement agencies. Communications Bureau, responsible for answering for all 911 emergency calls, also responsible for dispatching police resources and routing fire EMS calls. Records Bureau, responsible for maintaining and processing police records. Budget and Finance Bureau performs administrative functions for the department. Property Bureau, responsible for all items of property booked as evidence, found, or safekeeping. Technology Bureau, responsible for all technology used by the department. They also have a section that handles as the liaison with Public Works for all matters related to their facilities. And last year, we transferred the Wireless Communication Division from the IT department to the police department, and this function is responsible for city radio equipment and systems, and, all of the city's wireless communications. Field Services Division includes Patrol Services Bureau, that provides patrol and frontline emergency services to the community on a 24/7, 365 basis. Custody Bureau operates the city's jail. Investigative Services Division, or ISD, comprised of Criminal Investigations Bureau that investigate property crimes such as burglary, financial crimes, and crimes against persons that include robbery, homicide, and assault detail. Special Investigations Bureau consists of the Vice Narcotics Detail that handle gambling, prostitution, narcotics, liquor laws, and licensing, and the Intelligence Detail that handles organized crime and homeland security. Fleet Maintenance Liaison is housed here in this division as well. And Court Services, responsible for misdemeanor filing, subpoena, discovery request, and communications with the DA's office. Last but not least, Support Services Division consists of 4 bureaus. Traffic Bureau that responds to traffic accident scenes and conducts investigations. Air Support Bureau, this is in partnership with the City of Burbank, provides an aerial observation platform in support of patrol and investigative operations, search and rescue functions, and tactical operations. Community Outreach Resources and Engagement Bureau, with the acronym of CORE, includes the Community Relations Team, CRT, Homeless Outreach and Psychological Evaluation Team, or HOPE, I love that acronym, and the Downtown Policing Unit.
Excuse me.
I just have a
Councilmember
question.
Devine has a question.
Are you finished with this, Peg? Can you repeat the three positions that they're going to be
Oh, sorry,
adding? One was the police lieutenant. Is that internally or is that from outside? And I'm sure they'll be answering those questions, and one was an analyst. And what was the third?
You're right. One is police lieutenant. The recruitment hasn't started. We're awaiting council's approval of this budget request.
Okay.
And investigative analyst and public safety business assistant.
So, okay, so the
And
only,
and if you need more details on the functions of these three positions, I would, at the end of this department's presentation, I'll ask Chief Sid to provide some more details.
thank you.
We were in community outreach. Yes, we covered that. And the last bureau, Specialized Service Bureau, consists of our Special Enforcement Detail. It's responsible for specific crime problems such as gang activity. Of course, not to be forgotten, a very important unit is our K-9 unit that, as you know, uses patrol dogs who are trained in areas such as narcotics detection, suspect apprehension, evidence searches and explosives, and firearm detection. With that, we'll delve into the department budget. This is the new graphical representation that I referred to that replaces the table listing that we had seen before. This budget is comprised of 8 separate funds. Starting with general fund, there's an increase of, a net increase of $5.8 million, mainly due to salaries and benefits that includes vacation and comp time, workers' compensation, and of course, PERS costs. A couple of noteworthy increases are $1.7 million increase in liability insurance, as well as $158,000 in utilities, plus the 3 new proposed positions and MOU provisions that we're obligated to comply with, as well as an increase in contractual obligations. In this fund, there are also 3 items that represent decreases. IT service charge in the amount of $1.5 million, building maintenance charge $200,000, and fleet equipment rental charge $838,000. Again, this represents a net increase of $5.8 million. In general fund measure S, we see a $1.4 million increase. This includes a number of new programs that we'll highlight later. E-bikes for patrol, police CAD upgrade, IT charge $841,000, radio replacement charge $943,000. There's a request for $100,000 for additional traffic enforcement, which is obviously council priority. That also includes one-time program reductions of jail security system for $600,000, forensic system applications is another IT charge, and public safety emergency response, another IT charge. So a net increase of $1.4 million in general fund measure S. Asset forfeiture funds, there's a net increase of $492,000. Again, this is primarily due to decreases in for next fiscal year 23-24. We will be shifting a police officer position to general fund. That's a $210,000 decrease in this fund, but it'll increase in general fund. And a $695,000 net increase in fleet capital. This is for a mobile command post. Next is the police fund, $113,000 increase, as well as a net increase, but there's a decrease due to shifting the GUSD SRO revenue to the general fund, amount of $100,000, and that gets offset by an increase in revenue that we've received from National Opioid Litigation Settlement in the amount of $211,000. In this fund, there are also 7 grants, total of about $800,000. The next 4 funds in the police department budget include supplemental law enforcement fund, a net increase of $150,000. This is due to higher projected revenue from the state for the COPS program, natural increases in salaries, workers' comp, and PERS, about $100,000, overtime, $33,000, liability insurance, $13,000. In the police building fund, there's a decrease of $3,000. This is due to the decrease in interest on the bonds, $101,000, offset by an increase in the principal amount of $100,000 and another $2,000 decrease in contractual services. The Joint Air Support Fund, increase of, well, there is really no minimal change. Contractor services increased $22,000 and vehicle maintenance $36,000. It's offset by excess insurance in the amount of $38,000. Lastly, the wireless fund is a $2.4 million increase. Some of the big ticket items, including the natural salaries and benefit increase, is a new capital outlay of $3 million. That includes police radios, fire department radios, microwave radio links, as well as non-safety department radios that is going to cost $1.6 million. And there are 2 decreases in the amount of $791,000. That covers the budget for the police department, and now we'll cover a handful of highlighted projects and programs or initiatives, starting with improved traffic safety. This is, again, a big priority for this council. How the department plans on doing it is by directed enforcement operations, increased education outreach efforts using the Office of Traffic Safety grant, speed camera pilot program. As you may recall, this is through AB 2336, which was amended by Assembly Member Friedman. Glendale is one of 7 agencies in California that was chosen for this speed safety pilot program. And increase in traffic bureau personnel and operational resources to bolster this operation. The value that these efforts will bring, obviously, will meet Council's adopted Vision Zero goals, efforts in reducing traffic collisions, enhanced pedestrian bicycle safety, as well as improved mobility. The funds will come from a general fund, an amount of $5.9 million, Measure S general fund, $300,000, and police fund, $315,000. The next item that we'd like to highlight is the enhanced accountability and transparency. As you may remember, last Tuesday, there was a conversation, and Chief Sid already mentioned his goal of establishing this bureau. It's the Transparency, Audits, and Accountability Bureau. How we'll do it is through internal audits, quarterly public reporting, and pursuing legislative mandates. Values that it'll bring is compliance with federal and state mandates, should increase public trust in the department, improve department efficiency and effectiveness, and enhanced risk management. All the funds, proposed $1.3 million, will come out of the general fund. The next highlight is improved traffic. Oh, my apologies, my slides are out of order. Increased visibility and engagement. How they plan on doing it is, as I mentioned, e-bikes for patrol officers in downtown Glendale, with emphasis on foot, beat, and bike patrol, and directed high visibility deployments in the downtown area, our shopping districts, special events, as well as our parks. And this would be a multimodal approach. The values that will bring are crime reduction, enhanced community engagement, maintaining response time, increased police visibility, economically and environmentally friendly use of e-bikes. We propose to take $2.5 million out of general fund and another $50,000 out of general fund measure S. Next highlight is emergency preparedness. How they plan on doing it is critical incident training, which includes active shooter training, TACMED and EMT, and natural disasters. So it'll be in collaboration with other city departments as well as local agencies through mutual aid and community education and engagement, and enhancing unified commands such as incident command systems. Values will bring public safety, improved regional partnership, prepared and equipped for proper emergency response, and availability of mobile operations. Planning on using $42.4 million out of general fund, $1.2 million out of asset forfeiture fund, and another $3 million out of the wireless fund. That is the last highlight, and yes, now I'll invite council if they have any questions.
Yeah, let's go through. I'm sure everybody has questions or comments. Anyone want to start? Councilmember Najarian?
Thank you. Thank you, Rubik. And a couple questions. On the total number of personnel, so there's a proposed 355, which includes those 3 extra positions. How many are actually filled
Chief said, would
today?
you?
Because I know we're down a little.
And we do have a number of vacancies that Chief said will cover.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Good to be with you all. In regards to the question, Councilmember Najarian, we're currently, unfortunately, carrying roughly a vacancy rate of almost 10%. So that breaks down from a sworn side of, on any given day, around 16 sworn vacancies on the sworn side, and then again, a handful on the professional side that are currently vacant. We're working hard to recruit and fill them. We also have a significant number, a handful of staff that are out, workers' comp, IOD, many of which the anticipation is that will never return, and those will also ultimately be vacancies we need to fill and hire.
So what do we do with the funds that are appropriated for the full force? Do those come back to the general fund? Are they retained as an internal fund in PD? So what do we do with that?
Mayor Brotman, Mayor City Council, Councilman Najarian, those funds stay with the department. They utilize, if they're not filled, those vacant positions, they utilize them out of necessity to pay for overtime sometimes to backfill the services that they need to provide until such time that those recruitments are completed. And as you know, these recruitments take a very long time. So we need to still provide for those operations.
Okay. Some of the increase in the budget is for new radios. And I mentioned that last Tuesday, 2 days ago, when libraries were asking for radios, and I said, well, once you get into it, you have to upgrade all the time because they become obsolete. What happens to our old radios? Can we give those to the library?
Chiefs.
We can certainly explore, and we do, I believe, cycling those through down the chain, if you will. One of the reasons you're seeing a request for more radios is to kind of complete a request that had started over the last couple of years, ultimately to become in compliance with the DOJ. The Department of Justice has essentially passed down an order to law enforcement that we need to encrypt our radios. Previous radios that the department had weren't capable of doing that. We've started towards that venture. This last handful of radios will get us to where we need to be, allowing the department to come in compliance, we're hoping, as early as July.
And Councilman Najarian, as you know, we're pretty frugal. We use not just these radios, almost all of our equipment down to the last heartbeat, and we may not be able, but we'll explore it. We may not be able to.
That's what we like to. That's what we like to see. In terms of enforcement, just an observation. I don't know who the motor officer is, but someone was working his tail off yesterday. He's got a bandana on underneath his helmet. Gentleman maybe in his 40s, but I saw him at 8 o'clock up and down Brand, tagging, which I think were speeders. Maybe there were pedestrian violations. And later in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, he was up and down Glendale Avenue, and he was working solo. I didn't see a partner with him, so whoever that is, the unknown motor officer, I definitely send my regards to his hard work. The last question, and maybe this is too big of a question for now, but there's been a proposal and discussion about moving some traffic enforcement to civilian employees. In the LA Times, there was an article 2 days ago that entitled, "How Can LA Stop Traffic Deaths? Let Civilians Enforce Traffic Violations." And they're referring to a study which was done, I don't know who did it, but that's a big policy decision. But just briefly, I mean, what do you think? Could you you've got a budget. Can you best use that budget by employing non-post certified employees? Or is that just a crazy idea because there's too many risks involved at a traffic stop?
I appreciate you acknowledging that this is a loaded topic that we could spend an entire meeting talking about, but I'll start by saying, let's just start with the law. Today, in the state of California, legally, you have to be a peace officer to essentially conduct traffic enforcement. To conduct traffic enforcement, you're detaining an individual. Peace officers have the right to do that. A civilian does not. So there would have to be some significant legal changes. Then we start talking about things that you just described with post, as far as certification, training. All the way up to the Supreme Court, over decades, they have acknowledged that traffic stops are inherently dangerous. So again, policy decision that needs to be made, some labor discussion around having civilians, non-armed individuals, conduct traffic enforcement, something that our courts have acknowledged is inherently dangerous. All the way down to, I believe, it will have a negative impact on crime. While the goal to go out and do traffic enforcement, education enforcement, that piece of it, but that's also a manner in which we conduct proactive policing and impact crime and respond to crime trends in our community, something that this department has done very well for a very long time. That would certainly have, I believe, a negative impact on that as well. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about there. Obviously, a lot of policy decisions, something that I would have significant reservation about.
Okay, last question, putting you on the spot. Despite our tight budget, is there anything that you would otherwise ask for that is off the table because of the budget issues? the budget constraints.
Yeah, and I think I've commented on this since early in my very short tenure here, is that this is a very lean organization, the police department. Even when fully staffed, comparatively speaking, both per capita and so on and so forth, is the workload that is put on this department versus the amount of staff we have, it's very lean. And that's okay, but that's something to be very mindful of. And then we're currently at a time where we have a significant amount of vacancies. But I say all that to say that I feel comfortable with where we are as far as the ask that we're making. A priority for me in the department here in the short term is we need to get these vacancies addressed and get our staffing back up, which obviously is important to remain effective and efficient. And then once we get to a place where our staffing numbers are much fuller or healthier, it'll allow me and the command staff to take a more, accurate kind of scale of where we are. I don't want to be at a place where we're lacking staff and to be asking for significantly more. I don't know. I want to always measure the amount of staff we have versus our workload. And I think the priority right now is to get those positions filled, and then gives me a chance to assess where we are going forward. But to answer your question, again, aside of wanting to fill the current vacancies we had badly, we are in a place where we're teetering on not good from a retention standpoint, a staffing standpoint, but once we get those filled, I'll feel good about where we are, and I feel comfortable with the ask that we have now, and don't feel that I necessarily need anything more at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm done.
You go, Nick.
Okay, Councilmember Devine?
Okay. I'm interested in the three additional positions, and I'm assuming that the reason you're not adding sworn officers is because you already have the funding, if we can find them, right? If you can find them and hire them, correct?
That's correct. Again, I would feel it not prudent to be asking for a significant amount more police officers when I'm currently have 15 plus vacancies at that position. Again, our goal is to get most of those filled, and then it allows me a chance to really assess and make a determination if I need to make a further request or not, may not. But yes, that's correct. That's
Okay, and you have enough funding to hire as many as you can find, in spite of the fact that you may be using some of the funding for overtime?
That's correct, we do. Right now, the challenge is the effort of going out there, recruiting good staff, getting them through a background, getting them through the testing process, getting them through an academy. So we're gonna make a real push. As the command staff knows, that has been it will be and is my number one priority right now is recruitment, and we're gonna make a real push both on how we brand our organization and use some resources available to us to go out. We need to make a real push to go out and hire a significant amount of officers, and we're doing it at a time where almost every significant agency in Southern California is going to do the same. City of Los Angeles, Torrance, Long Beach, all the larger, mid to large size agencies are going to make a push to hire hundreds of cops, and we've got to compete against all of them to find some.
Right, and I think Antioch is going to be on the top of the list. But anyway, that's beside the point. You mentioned the mobile command post. Is that the one up in Montrose that you're talking about, or is this a different concept, if you can explain that? And I don't remember what the cost, what was the amount and the budget for that?
Yeah, so the amount is roughly, I think, 1.2, 1.3. That is funds that will be coming largely from asset forfeiture and a smaller piece from a new OSSI grant that we're anticipating and hoping to get later in the fiscal year. The mobile command post, for a lack of better terms, is a large RV. That what it allows us to do is it's a police department on wheels. And whether it's a major incident, God forbid a shooting, a critical incident, a natural disaster, all the way down to if we had a significant enough natural disaster that our building becomes inoperable, it allows me, the staff, to bring our police department and make it mobile to wherever we got to go. Everything from satellite uplink, internet access, cover from the elements, all of those sorts of things. The department currently has one. It's almost as old as I am, so we're due to get a new one. An important
Which isn't
piece.
that old.
I was going to say, what is it, 21, 15? I don't know.
I appreciate that. So yes, it's an important piece of emergency response. Being able to go out there, again, have those resources, bring them to a scene, and allow the staff the resources they need to deal with almost given any operation.
Okay,
Councilmember Devine,
Yes.
apologies, the
Yeah.
cost, the proposed estimated cost is $1.2 million.
Okay, I didn't realize that we already had one that you're replacing. So what you're doing is you're replacing The old one?
That's
What
correct.
happens to the old one? Can we contribute it to someone?
We'll look to either contribute it, sell it, see if we can cover some funds. Granted, it's, again, in all honesty, about 30 years old. Not quite as old as me, but yes, we'll look to recover what funds we can from it. That money would necessarily, would ultimately come back to the general fund, or there's always the potential of donating it, or we will explore all those options once the time comes.
Okay. On page 11, you mentioned, it was mentioned that increased traffic bureau personnel. Can you explain that?
That's correct. So that is not an additional ask to the council. That is the department reallocating funds within the organization. Traffic obviously is a priority for the city council. It is for me as well. I have already, in conjunction with the command staff, reallocated some staff within the organization and reassigned them to the traffic bureau so they can go out and do what Councilmember Najarian was highlighting. And my goal is, once we're able to fill more of these spots, is to add more into the traffic bureau, somewhere like another 6 officers to traffic that will go out every day with the focus of doing enforcement and education. So right now, 2 was all that we could spare to pull away from patrol and trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, if you will. But the goal is, with the current funding allocation we have, is we get those spots filled to grow folks that are focused on going out and doing traffic enforcement.
Okay, good. All right. And the e-bikes, that's a new program?
That is new. I'm a big proponent of it. I think that's a lot of value. Number one, I'll start by saying the feedback that I have seen in past previous agency as well as here when we get our police officers on bikes, I think that's really well received by our community. With the technology, if you will, of e-bikes, it allows an individual to get around at 25 plus miles an hour, which still gives them a good scope. And my idea, the plan is to take our downtown policing unit as well as other staff, increase our presence, particularly up and down Brand and around downtown, as well as some of our other major shopping centers, parks. It allows them to get in and around areas that necessarily you can't in a car. It gets them out of their car, which again, I think is a good community policing impact. And then again, that visible presence, which I think goes a long way to deterring crime in our community. I think it's a win-win all the way across the board, and it's environmentally friendly. So.
Right, well, that, I was going to ask you about where you would get the officers. Would you take them out of the cars or the bicycles, or what, how would you?
Yeah, I think the start will be with looking at taking our current downtown policing unit and just kind of revamping that and kind of changing their mission a little bit, tweaking it slightly. So that's where it would start. That's existing staff. Again, that's unit's a little short on staff right now, just from a hiring standpoint. But it would start there, and then we'll find other opportunities to deploy officers, particularly like at special events, when we're having large events at the park, things of that nature, to see them on bikes or on foot beats rather than the car.
Okay. And then on page 14, you mention enhancing unified command. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and that's something that I've spent some time talking about with our fire chief, and that really just talks about very similar to what we saw the other day when fire responded out to the collapsed building. It's, in the most basic of terms, how police and fire, as well as other entities within the city, public works, so on and so forth, collaborate on an incident. And I think that's really important from an emergency preparedness standpoint. The mobile command post, that's a piece of equipment that lends itself to that. Some of that's just training, command and control, and it really speaks to collaboration and relationship with our public safety partner and really all city departments in preparing to, again, respond to any incident, emergency that might happen here in our city, and that we can respond to it effectively and efficiently.
My initial thought was, from the general fund, this is $42 million. How is that going to be spent with this, incident training, collaboration, community education, enhancing unified? It just seems like 42 million for that is a lot.
Yeah, and I think the reason that seems like a big number, and it is a big number, is it's speaking to staff that's not all they're doing, that's going to speak to, in portion, patrol staff, if you will, and their piece of training them and preparing them to be a part of incident response. So again, it's not like we're necessarily taking $42 million and just pouring it into incident command. It really speaks to the amount of staff that are a part of that and the cost of that staff, while that entire cost, if that makes any sense, isn't just to that item or that initiative, if you will.
Right. Councilmember Devine, that $42.2 million is police department's regular operations budget.
Okay. And, okay, thank you. My final question is kind of like Councilmember Najarian's. This is what I've been reading, that there is possible legislation that canines will be banned from arresting incidences. Can you,
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
what does that
currently,
mean
yes,
to us?
currently the state legislator is considering a bill that's coming down that would essentially outlaw or regulate police, law enforcement's ability to use canines for apprehension in an arrest of a violent suspect, up to and including as well, I think it also mentions crowd control. Obviously, something that is concerning. The California police chiefs, which I'm a part of, as well as other law enforcement organizations, are in opposition of it. Happy to say that time that I spent with Assemblymember Friedman, she also is opposing it. So I'm hoping that it will not make its way through. I believe that currently is with the Appropriations Committee, and we'll see where it goes from there. But something we're keeping an eye on. We have a really good canine program. It's a great resource, both safe to our staff, as well as ultimately sometimes really uses a de-escalation tool that, while getting bit by a dog is serious, obviously it can deter something more serious like a shooting or things of that nature. A great tool for going out and searching for suspects that might be hiding, all the way through to what we use them, in detection of narcotics, bombs, so on and so forth. So concerning for sure.
Well, yeah, that could mean the end of the canine unit in police?
Essentially, it would. At that point, the dogs could only be used for detection of a substance or whatnot. It could not be used to go out, search out an individual that might be hiding and apprehend them.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Satrian?
I have a follow-up to the question Councilmember Najarian had, Mr. Galanian, or maybe the chief. The 16 vacancies, you noted that then it's used for overtime, but then are all the funds used down to the last dollar, or if there's funds left over, what happens to those funds?
So if there's funds left over, and correct me if I'm wrong, there will be funds left over that will essentially come back into the general fund, and I think the finance director could speak better to it than I can.
That is absolutely correct. Any budget savings that the police department does not use to pay for overtime because of vacancies or critical expenditures for maintenance and operations does revert back to the fund. For the entire general fund, we know we do have a certain level of vacancies every year in the general fund, and we do plan on that, and we factor that into our budget forecast. The 5-year forecast I presented to the council last week, including the proposed 23-24 budget, does factor in a level of vacancy savings, budget savings, if you will. And anything unspent does revert back to our fund balance.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure I'm clear, because this is an important point. So you're saying the budget you're presenting, the head count you're presenting, assumes that you have no vacancies?
The budget that we are presenting would be our allocation for, if we were able to fill every one of those, would cover every one of those, that employee or personnel count you had. That said, while that is the funds that are being provided, we don't meet that. We have vacancies, so it creates something of a salary savings that is used internally to offset that we go over our allotted budget for overtime. But even after that, after offsetting the overture that we have in overtime, there's still money that comes back into the general fund at the end of our fiscal year because of the vacancies.
Okay, so
As salary savings.
right, that 355 positions or however many, that's all the positions, but you're saying we have 10% of those that are not filled?
That are vacant, they're currently vacant, roughly 10%.
I get it, just wanted to make sure. Sorry to interrupt.
With respect to dealing with our unhoused population, I haven't seen anything that's kind of specific in the budget, but are there resources that are needed for our officers, whether it's training? Can you kind of walk me through how you guys go through that process?
Yeah, so I'll start by prefacing everything I'm going to say, that I think any 21st century law enforcement organization today needs to have some resources and component that help them dealing with the unhoused, with the mentally ill, so on and so forth. We do have funds within the organization for that. So the HOPE team that I think the city manager spoke to earlier, which is our officers that are dedicated to go out and engage officer resources and work with the unhoused as well as the mentally ill, is a segment of our department within CORE that's all they do every single day. So there's a few officers that are dedicated to just that. A couple of those officers work alongside clinicians from the Department of Mental Health. One of those initially was essentially given to us, if you will, by the Department of Mental Health in collaboration. And then I think about a year ago, the department engaged the Department of Mental Health to want to get a second clinician. That was going to come at a cost. And we are currently using, and I believe it's Measure S funds, to help pay for that second clinician from the Department of Mental Health currently. This budget, again, asks for those same funds to continue to keep that contract, if you will, with the Department of Mental Health for that second clinician.
Do you feel like you have enough resources for that? No?
If I'm being honest, I think every police chief in Southern California would say right now they could use a handful more clinicians. But in light of our unhoused count and where we are, and when I compare us to most other entities and organizations, we are very blessed to have 2 clinicians. While I could certainly use another 1 or 2, we're in a pretty good spot, particularly when you compare us to where most of the county is.
Okay. I think the other question I had to do with sensitivity training. I don't know if we still do that within the department, but I remember at least 10 years ago, we had sensitivity training for our officers, specifically in our police department. It was a collaboration between different community organizations and the police department. I know that at least in the last 6-7 years, we've had a new influx of immigrant communities that have moved into Glendale, which bring in their own culture and set of ways. So can you kind of walk me through how you're using some of the budget for that?
Yeah.
And if you guys still have the program.
Sure. I think that over that evolution that you just described, I think law enforcement as a whole, and I would argue that this organization at the tip of that spear, because I think it's one of the best around, have evolved with that. And some of what you described as sensitivity training has really become baked into training, even for line level police officers. They go through the academy and then they come out into training. So that has really grown and really just become a part of what we do now and how we train any new employee. I would highlight that. The other thing I would highlight is that this is an organization, like much of this profession, that its diversity in who we employ has changed as well. So while you described that the dynamics and demographics of this community have changed, so have this police departments. You just look at the command staff, the management team, and you see that change. So that sensitivity, again, almost gets baked into our organization because we're bringing different cultures into our organization, which naturally expose a lot of our other officers to these different takes. With that, we're always looking for new ways and new trainings. I believe before I got here, everything from racial bias training, 21st century policing training, the interactions that we deal with on traffic stops being culturally sensitive and understanding of the impacts that has on folks. So that stuff's ongoing. Some of it comes down from post that's mandated. Some of it's trainings that we identify internally that we try to grow our organization. We'll continue to look for those while we have to remain mindful, that I don't have endless training funds, and just mandated training that comes from post is a significant amount of money that costs us as an organization. Some of it is not reimbursable. So I have to make sure that while there's so much training out there, that we pick the right ones and that we're efficient with the training that we send our staff to.
Is the training specific to Glendale's community, or is it just an overarching sensitivity training?
I would say, obviously, the stuff that comes down from post, our governing body, is going to probably be more general cultural awareness that's more general across the spectrum. But what we do internally, naturally, is going to be more specific to our community, understanding that, we want to be reflective and police in a manner that's reflective of our community. So the internal training that we're doing is very reflective, if you will, and being mindful of the community that we serve specifically here in Glendale.
Okay. And then the business assistant position that you're requesting, is that the individual that's overseeing the day-to-day help for the building, or?
No, so the business assistant position is currently not filled. This would be obviously with the approval of council. Then we would go out and have to recruit that position. The purpose of it, in large part, is to assist some of our administration sections within the department with a great deal of administrative work. Namely, one of the ones that would be right at the top of the list is dealing with the current influx of CCW permit applications or concealed carry weapons. That workflow, if you will, workload has increased 100 times over just the last 6 months because of the law change. So this position will help with some administrative duties, but namely dealing with that significant influx of work that has come from the CCWs.
I think the last comment I have on this is on Vision Zero. At the SCAT conference, some colleagues from our neighboring cities were bringing up, and I asked them to email me, I haven't gotten it yet, but that recent studies are showing that Vision Zero is actually having a negative impact after implementation. So I recognize that that's part of the budget that we're looking at, and I'm hoping that as we go through the process, we can take a look at some of these new data sets that are coming out. I believe they said from Portland and some of the other cities that have implemented that, for us to look at that before we move forward in the final stage.
Right. Councilmember Sartian, our CDD director, Mr. Calvert, is planning to bring a staff report, an update on the Vision Zero that will include concerns that you have raised, at least research into those concerns.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kasakian.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, and to your staff for presenting this proposed budget. Am I correct to understand that, so the gang unit used to be a standalone unit, was it not?
I believe at one time it was.
All right, and it is no longer. Can you explain that decision to include it into the operations of which unit is it under now?
Special enforcement
Special
detail.
enforcement. What are the areas of enforcement for the special enforcement?
Yeah, so it's a special enforcement unit within our operations out in the field. These are officers that are going to be out essentially in uniform, but they go out and do directed patrols and directed enforcements for different problem areas that we might see around the community. For instance, we're having, let's say, a burglary issue in a certain community. We'll deploy this unit into that area to try to make an impact on that through traffic enforcement, through contacts that they make. It's really the proactive arm of our patrol function. They will naturally still do some gang-related enforcement and intelligence that relates to that, but it's not a standalone gang unit. I think I'm happy to report that we don't have a significant gang presence, street gang presence in Glendale. That might have changed, and I think that was probably a part of the decision-making process when that was decided. But as you see it today, gangs are a part of the special enforcement detail's focus, but it's broader than that, and they're really more of a special problems unit that we use around the city to go out and really do proactive, impactful police work, being mindful of the crime trends that we're seeing around the community.
So I don't have the statistics in front of me to know what the increases or decreases in gang activity are. I do know that one time there were, but the one thing I have noticed is a lot more graffiti and specifically tagging with what appears to be, for anyone who's been around the area and knows some of the names of the groups that at various times tried to make incursions into Glendale, that there is some more of that activity of late. Without going into the details of what has contributed to that, how are we proposing to address that issue?
Yeah, so again, I would start with the special enforcement detail. This is a group that on any given year, even though over the last couple, is making anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 arrests a year. I think in the most basic of terms is we got to show it attention. And much like we do with a lot of other things in this community, we need to go out there, do some intelligence gathering around this tagging, what it means, who it's coming from. You have this cross-section of gang-related tagging activity, and then you have taggers, folks that are going out and largely vandalizing for their own motives, if you will. So we need to be mindful of it. I would start there, collect intelligence and data around it, and then be really strategic and deliberate about how we go out and impact that. But I would start with the Special Enforcement Division, and then how they kind of intersect with any investigations that we do on the back end.
Okay. I would like us to, I'd like to ask staff and your department to pay close attention to that. I do understand that tagging may be sometimes considered an outdated mode of communication or marking your territory, and even some of the gang and gang-affiliated people are embracing technology nowadays, communicating via the social media apps. But it is something that is of concern whenever we have other crimes that occur. Obviously, we have issues of the proliferation of certain narcotics in the community. A lot of times that can be traced back to some sort of organized activity that's either gang or other organized group affiliated. I wouldn't want us to thin out our resources and not address those issues when we can get ahead of them early on. So I don't know if, yes, Mr. Galanian.
Councilmember Kasakian, we do have, as part of the last budget study session, a segment dedicated to wrap-up. If you'd like, Chief Sid can come back during that session and give you an update on use of technology by gangs and how he plans to.
It doesn't have to be done publicly. I'm happy to receive a briefing from the department directly, but it is something that I am concerned about, and I think a lot of residents are as well.
Understood.
Yes.
No, just understood, and it's certainly something that we will maintain and continue to be mindful of. It's not on the back burner by any stretch, and I will ensure that we give it its due regard and continue to make sure that we have enough resources, staffing allowing, to be able to go out there and impact and give it the attention it deserves.
Thank you. So now I understood correctly as well that there's a 100,000 increase for additional traffic enforcement, but that's not all there is to that. You're also reallocating certain or moving positions around to make sure that there's more. So technically, the resources that we are putting into traffic enforcement is greater than 100,000 additional that you're asking for.
That's correct. That extra 100,000 really is really designed to allow for more directed enforcement operations. But yes, you're correct that we are much more than another 100,000 that we're putting towards increased traffic enforcement.
I repeat that because I think that for those, and hopefully people are watching these meetings, I think they're probably the only meetings that are worth watching for the public to understand what we struggle with. But I know, budget meetings are not the most exciting thing for people to watch. But when we say we're only putting $100,000 into traffic enforcement, it can be misleading, and the people watching who are frustrated and who contact us all the time about speeding, about people just thumbing their noses at our traffic laws, they won't feel that's enough. So I'm glad to hear that there's more. I think that we should do as much as we can, because I think traffic enforcements oftentimes result in quality stops and interactions that can result in addressing other issues before they become issues.
Couldn't agree with you more. And while I can't do the math right off the top of my head, we're talking in the millions of dollars that as an organization, as a police department, we put specifically at traffic enforcement. And that doesn't even count the folks that are working just patrol that will naturally do some traffic enforcement as well. So it's a significant number. We're going to continue to, staffing allowing, grow that because it is without question a priority for me and for the organization.
Sure. And I'm fully aware that, my position on that may be somewhat controversial, and public may say, well, why are you advocating for more police giving out more tickets? Well, that's because we see what we see from the drivers on the streets, and that's one of the ways, and I think one of the more effective ways we can address it, along with education and engineering. I understand that, but when people have the fear of having to receive and pay a ticket for violating the laws, it certainly helps. I didn't see school resource officers in this budget, and I'm very concerned about what's happening on campuses, the safety of our children, even something as the interactions that may lead to other issues further down the line. And I don't want to again expand upon that and go into specifics of what has happened in other communities. What are we doing to increase the number of school resources officers?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. If I can, just, I think it's worth adding in light of your comment, it's, in regards to traffic enforcement, as we wrap that up, we also we go out and do traffic enforcement in a data-driven way. And what I mean by that is we look at traffic collisions, what the primary collision factor is, and then those are the things that our traffic enforcement officers go out and really focus on and try to impact. So I think that's an important piece. We're not just out there discriminately stopping folks just for the sake of handing out tickets. Moving forward to the SRO question, incredibly important. I've spent time, I think, with all of you individually to some degree talking about it, as well as our school district and having good relations with them and understanding their needs. We currently have 2 SROs assigned to what is a fairly large school district of 30 some odd schools, not nearly enough. It is my plan, again, staffing allowing, as we get into the new school year, that within my current staffing allowment in the budget, to add a 3rd SRO. And to move some people around within the organization and reallocate it and get a 3rd SRO. My goal is ultimately get to a 4th. Reason I didn't push that request forward really comes back to what we spoke to earlier. I did not think it was prudent to ask for more police officers when I'm currently down 15 or 16. Once I can get that number to more reasonable levels of maybe, a very small handful of openings, that quite possibly could be something that I would bring to the city manager and council for consideration.
Thank you. I understand that perspective. I would just prioritize school resource officers over any other positions that you may have. After all, it's going to be one of the positions that deals with our city's most precious resource. So we have how many police officers assigned to motor currently?
I believe as of today, we're at 12.
Okay, and what are we usually at, or what do we want to be at?
Well, I want to be like closer to 20.
Okay. In terms of recruitments, what are we doing differently to be able to recruit in a pretty tough job market as it is?
Yeah, so more generally, I'm currently, as the fire chief, in the middle of a recruitment for a community liaisons or communications manager position. I'll just start with our social media platforms and presence right now is not at a place that I'd like to see it at, and we'll start there. That's such an important way that particularly youth communicate nowadays. So with this new position bringing on, me kind of putting my own stamp on it, we're really going to try to do a better job of branding this organization. I don't say it to sound cliche. I believe this to be the premier law enforcement organization in this region, and I don't think that we're doing a good enough job to market and brand ourselves regionally to get folks to come and want to be here. This is the best place to work if you want to be a law enforcement officer in our region. So we're going to make a real effort, everything from a recruitment video that we might even ask some of you if you're willing to be a part of, all the way through to how we brand ourselves, social media, and then also being very deliberate about how we go out and who we recruit. It's not enough to just cast a wide net. We want to be strategic with who we're recruiting, people that are going to come and fit our culture, our community. Within the organization, just a month ago, reallocated again, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul within the organization, but added another person to our personnel and recruitment section. We're going out and really farming our social groups as well as our community and local colleges, particularly our athletic groups, both male and female. So we're really going to try to push forward those efforts because it really is top priority. We've got to get these positions filled before we get into a place where we have catastrophic numbers of vacancies like some agencies are experiencing.
Well, I appreciate, by the way, the offer to be in one of your videos, but there is a writer's strike right now, so I don't know if I'd cross the picket line. But my last question is in regards to overtime. What was overtime last year that the department had in terms of dollar amount? How does it compare in the previous to the previous couple of years?
So I don't necessarily have the historicals off the top of my head, but this last year, this current fiscal year that we're just about to wrap up, about $6.5 million, which is at least a couple of million over what we're allocated. But again, I would point to the fact that $2.5 million of that was overtime just in patrol alone to ensure that we have minimum staffing, that our response time doesn't go up, and we can still be effective out in the field. So it really comes back to the reason we were blowing through our overtime budget really starts with the vacancy rates that we have. And I've got to have staff going out there answering calls for service, doing so in a timely manner. If I'm not mistaken, our current overtime this year is going to be very close to mirroring where it was last year. It is something that I want to, and it's something I spent time talking to the city manager, is bring that number down, and I'm very sensitive to that. But I would just start by saying a 10% vacancy rate is significant. And we are a very lean organization to begin with. And as soon as we start creating vacancies, people go out, and then we've got to I have to take care of our staff and, give them some vacation time and their sick time and some time away from a very difficult job. And that ultimately means when they're not here, someone else has to be, and it drives up that overtime number. I'm sensitive to it. I'm very mindful of it. And it is my expectation and hope that as we can get some of these vacancies filled, as those vacancy numbers go up, if you will, or down rather, and we fill some positions, that overtime number will go down.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm not going to ask some of the other questions, but I would like in the future, in the very near future, a report back or some information on how our reserve officer program is doing, what the ranks are there, how they're being utilized to fill in some of these gaps that may be resulting in some of the overtime. I know that innovation, and my second question would be that I know we had an innovation effort to try and streamline or make the application process more user-friendly. There was a Domino's pizza tracker model that was utilized. I remember hearing the presentation about that at a Cal Cities conference, and I'd be curious to know whether that has actually borne any fruit or whether it was something that we did and it was not resulting in what we want as an outcome. So thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, Mayor Broutman.
Okay. Councilmember Satru?
I recognize that we're one of the best to work at, but it's not just, and I recognize that it's not just money that brings people, but how do we compare to other agencies? Are they having a better shot at recruiting individuals and bringing them in, or are we, what are some things that we could be doing?
Yeah, so I'll start with, again, this is an organization that has a good, strong reputation. That said, I think we just need to do a better job of advertising that culture, this community, the support that we generally have in this community, and the importance of that. That said, we are not alone in dealing with recruitment challenges. I'd start by saying, while we have some challenges, we're in a much better situation than many of the agencies around us. The city of Los Angeles is going to look to hire over 1,000 police officers. That's a lot. City of Long Beach is down 100 police officer positions. Torrance Police Department, that is a relatively similar sized organization to ours, is down 40. People are struggling with this is a profession that has dealt with a lot of scrutiny, that has impacted the desirability for some folks to come. But I think there's some things that make this community and this department unique, and we just need to do a better job of pushing that forward. And I would just start by saying the support that we receive from our elected officials in this community is something we need to do a better job of branding and putting out, because that is very attractive for folks that want to come into this profession.
Okay, I'll just end mine with thank you. I know I say this time and again, but I'm proud to live in a city that I can take walks at 2 in the morning by myself. So,
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Okay, Chiefs. I guess the benefit of going last is that a lot of the questions get answered before it gets to me. So, let's see. So we were talking about, the overall expenses and, the vacancies and how that's kind of, there's the assumption that there's funding to cover all those, but in reality, we're not going to end up filling all those. And just to make sure, so that's fully loaded. Whenever we look at these numbers, I guess that's a question for Jason. That's fully loaded. That's health insurance and pension and everything, right?
Mayor Brown, members of council, that's absolutely correct. All the salary and benefit numbers for all the authorized positions in our budget are fully loaded, so it includes those items you indicated.
Okay. The police lieutenant position that you want to add, since we have so many positions that are vacant, what's the point of adding another police lieutenant position that you might not be able to fill?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So a little different with that. That will be an internal promotion within the organization. So within my current staffing levels today, we will run a recruitment and a promotional process with internal. We'll establish a civil service eligibility list, and I will ultimately promote somebody from within the organization up the ranks, if you will, into that position. Now, keeping in mind that that'll trickle down to a vacancy at the line level, something that I have to be mindful of, but that's not, I currently have an eligibility list. Once that position is approved, I have the ability to make a selection, promote somebody within the organization. That's a little different than having to go out and hire new police officers and bring them into our organization.
Right. Why wouldn't we then cut a position lower down in the organization?
I would not like to see us do that. I need every single one of the positions I have, to be quite frank. Again, even if I was fully staffed, this is a very lean organization. And when we talk about the workload that we have, whether it's traffic enforcement, gang enforcement, emergency operations, every one of our staff has a full plate across the board. And I guess the most simplest answer is we need that body. We need that position.
Okay, but you're not able to fill it. That's
Well, I intend to try to fill it through recruitment.
okay. Let's see. I have just kind of random things here that my colleagues have brought up, but I want to go over a little bit more. So, I guess talking about enforcement, because that's a really important one to all of us. You know, Councilmember Najarian asked a question about using civilians, using, outsourcing, using some third part. But I understand that agencies are doing this and maybe not pulling people over, maybe not doing stops with civilians, but maybe doing scouting or whatever you want to call it, kind of identifying a speeder, then calling it in so that an officer then can respond to that right away. Are those things we can consider, because we want to get more, right? We want to get more eyes out there. How do we do that without spending a lot of money and also we have this problem, we can't recruit
Right. So
peace
it's
officers?
It's a great question, and it's something I've spent time already talking with the city manager about, and what this council can expect from me and my desire in moving forward is what I would describe as kind of modernizing our police department. And we have a growing workload for law enforcement. Some of that is we definitely need staff, and we've got to get those positions filled. But I think the other piece is not always necessarily having to throw more staff at it. I think the way you offset that is we look for opportunities, maybe with technology, to offset that, whether we're talking about speed radar, automated red light enforcement, all the way through to using traffic cameras and real-time kind of watch centers that could put a civilian monitoring a camera that can identify traffic flow issues and enforcement issues, point that out to the boots on the ground, to an enforcement officer, to go out and redirect our resources at any given time in real time to have a positive impact. And that is going to be something that I look to kind of undertake, an initiative that I look to undertake going forward over the next handful of months and years to really integrate technology into what we do with the current staff that we have.
Okay, yeah, I would just ask, don't want to get into it a whole lot, but just to look at that harder, or maybe you're already looking at it, but anyway, let us know what kind of some options are, because it takes a long time to recruit these people, but we have, a really, critical problem. It's not a new problem, but it's a problem that we just haven't been able to address. So what creative things, you mentioned red light cameras, I actually had that on my list. What are some, ways that we can use technology, use third parties, and, just kind of impact the problem quickly?
Really hopeful with the speed radar legislation, keeping our fingers crossed that passes. Again, red light photo enforcement program. I came from an organization that had a very robust photo red light enforcement program, completely civilianized, and it was incredibly impactful at those intersections and the impact it was having on safety. You see what we're doing with our ALPRs, automatic license plate readers. That's a little bit more crime related, but nevertheless, the same idea and same principle. And then again, I'm going to come forward, I think, over the next, God willing, couple of years to push forward some ideas through the CM and to this council and how it relates to technology, how we integrate that, and how it can impact both crime and traffic safety.
Okay. And then, let's see. On the clinicians that we have, what kind of coverage do we have? Because they're not with us 24/7, obviously. So what do we have between the two of them?
Yeah, very fortunate that with the second clinician, that gave us now essentially 6-day-a-week coverage, which is really, really good. I would love to obviously have 24/7, 365. We're not there, but we currently have 6 days a week coverage, and on the days they're here, we usually have a clinician on duty anywhere from 8 to 10 hours through any given day. We usually deploy them in those kind of afternoonish hours, late morning into the early evening, trying to get the best bang for our buck, kind of the busiest time of the day. But yeah, I mean, at 2 a.m. in the morning, we don't typically have one on, and Again, fortunate now that we've spanned it to 6 days a week.
Okay, so 6 days a week, you're saying 8 to 10 hour coverage? on
Roughly,
those
yeah, and
6
again, it's
days.
kind of those midday hours.
Right. And here's another area where I know we're all reading a lot about, new approaches to kind of mental health situations that may not rise to a 5150 or to a, kind of a threat situation, and how we address them in a more, humane way, because putting somebody, cuffing somebody and putting them in a police car when they're having just kind of an anxiety attack can't feel good. So are there ways that we can, and maybe I'm not really looking for an answer to these right now, because these are complicated questions, but just putting it out there that these are things, I would like to see us drill into some more and see what we can do.
I
And
think-
maybe there's cost savings, maybe there's not.
Yeah. I don't, it is my thought that there won't necessarily be cost savings. I think just as a general statement, I think that as time goes on, cities are grappling with this same challenge. We are going to have to develop what I would describe almost as a third arm of public safety. And I think how that's gonna, very similar how over the years, police and fire, two different arms of public safety have integrated what we do. We co-respond, sometimes we respond individually. I think there's gonna have to become this third entity, if you will, that there'll be stuff that the police doesn't need to respond to that could be handled by a clinician or some sort of civilian. And then there's gonna be times where we do need to co-respond. I don't know that police need to be the face of mental health outreach, but I do think that we need to be a part of that response in certain instances, and it's kind of working through what that looks like going forward. So something we give a great deal of thought to. This department has done some work with that, with what you see with our co-response model with two clinicians. Not everybody has that. And I think as time goes on, we continue to find ways to identify some things that we can take off the plate of law enforcement, and then also find ones that we know we're still gonna have to be a part of responding to, but really rethink how we respond to that stuff.
Right. It's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be taking things, reducing costs. It can be just improving,
Correct.
outcomes, improving
Exactly.
coverage. Okay. And then I think I might, yeah, I would at some point like to see some comps, some comparables, because you talk about, how we're a lean organization. I think quantifying some of that, not simply officers to population, but maybe there are different ways to look at where we stand against other organizations, and also kind of some of the things that maybe we do that others may, there may be best practice, or where there's some things that we do that could be done at lower cost, so that we're able to shift resources into some higher priority areas.
Sure, and again, I would, without going crazy into data, you mentioned the per capita piece, and that's one piece of the conversation. This is an organization on the sworn side, about 1.1, 1.2 officers per 1,000 resident. That's even lower than the city of LA. You go into the west side of Los Angeles, most of those numbers are gonna be like in the threes, 3 officers per 1,000, 3+. So very, very lean. And then I think another important piece is that not only do we have 200,000 residents, this is a fairly densely populated area, particularly during the day because of Brand, the Americana. There's an influx. The major thoroughfares with highways that come through here bring a great deal of people, both visitors and whatnot, into this community. So again, I would describe it as a growing workload in a lot of different ways. And I would just go back to what I said earlier with finding ways that not always having to address that with staff, some of that staffing, some of that's, again, the technology piece, and finding ways to streamline what we do, how we respond to it.
Right. Another thing that's come up here is the take-home vehicles. How much does that cost us? What do we spend on take-home vehicles?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that that's something that even before it recently came up at council, it's something that probably within my first month or two of joining the organization is something I took a look at to see where we were with that. And I'll start by saying that since my time here, we've really leaned that out. I've, to be quite frank, taken away a handful of those quote-unquote take-home vehicles. Feel very confident in saying the amount of take-home vehicles we have now really speak to either one of two things, either something that's, for lack of better words, MOU protected, or something that's given in the MOU, or something that I've identified saying that there's an operational need. It's not a commuter vehicle, it's something that has an operational need for this individual, both from an emergent response or a part of the assignment that they're attached to. And I'll say, taking a hard look at those numbers, it costs the city, as far as gas for the individuals that are having take-home vehicles, somewhere around $40,000 a year in gas for those folks, which, $40,000 is $40,000, but I think in the grand scheme of thing in the operation, that's a relatively small number, particularly when you talk about the offset and why we have that both in emergency response, our violent crimes detectives, things of that nature. We're very much in line, I would say, even on the leaner side of being the individuals that have take-home cars are in line with industry standard, and there's a good reason for them to have them.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Before we move on to the next Public Safety Department, I wanted to thank Chief Sid, the command staff, the budget liaison, and the budget team. It truly takes a village to put these proposed budgets together, and I thank them for it. Okay. And next is our Class 1 Fire Department. I will start off with the personnel. Currently, there are 213 full-time staff members. The department is proposing 3 new firefighter paramedic positions. And there is a slight decrease in hourly full-time equivalents due to less staff time hours needed. The department currently has 168 sworn members and 45 non-sworn members. With the addition of, if and when approved, addition of these 3 firefighters, it would make it to 171 sworn members. The department is comprised of 7 divisions, starting with the Verdugo Fire Communications Center, which serves not only our city, as you know, but also 11 other cities and the Burbank Hollywood Airport. The Fire Prevention Bureau, for the past 3 years, has completed 100% of its state and local mandated inspections, as well as 100% of our brush inspections. Administration supports the department and all activities. Operations is the largest division in the department, while last year the department had its busiest year in its 115-year history. Training helps to provide an ongoing and new standards and training to the department. The EMS division, with 40 hourly ambulance operators who staff our 6 ambulances. And lastly, emergency management helps to keep our city employees and the community prepared for disasters. As for the fire department budget, it's comprised of 6 funds. The total proposed budget for 23-24 is just over $90 million. That represents an $8.3 million increase year over year. Starting with general fund, there is a net increase of $6.9 million. Similarly, it's mainly due to an increase in salaries and benefits. That includes vacation and comp time, workers' compensation, obviously PERS cost, liability insurance. To your point, Mr. Mayor, it's fully loaded. And addition of the 3 new proposed positions of firefighter paramedics, that represents an increase of $888,000. There's also in this fund the Fire Academy budget, and an offset and decreases in fleet equipment rental charge of almost $300,000. General Fund Measure S, there's a net increase of $817,000, primarily due to the cost purchase of fleet items that, as you know, has been going up. In this case by $345,000. This would be for the purchase of life safety firefighting apparatus and equipment compared to what we had budgeted last year. Total appropriation necessary is estimated at 1.4 million. We're also asking for new appropriation for radio replacement, approximately 600,000. Decreases in tele-staff contract, 53,000, and electronic patient care records contract, that's 74,000. These were one-time expenses in the previous year. Hazardous disposal fund, there's a small increase of $16,000 due to salaries and benefits. The Fire Mutual Aid Fund, decrease of $418,000. This is due to overtime expenses, process that Chief earns based on his conservative planning of Fire Mutual Aid resources for next year. Capital Improvement Fund, Measure S, increase of $700,000. Two new appropriations are requested or proposed. This would be for Fire Station 24 restrooms, as well as Fire Station 27 ambulance operator dorm improvements. Fire Communication Fund, there's a net increase of $269,000, again, mainly for salaries and benefits. Capital outlay, $140,000 for automated voice dispatch, UPS battery replacement, and digital design for WestNet, offset by decreases in contractual services and depreciation for a total of $80,000. Moving on to departmental highlights. Start with Firefighter Recruit Academy. This is a 16-week academy or academies in fiscal year 23-24. This is funded annually in the fire department's training budget, and it's used to support continuous hiring to avoid the use of overtime to backfill vacant positions. There's similar to the police department, anticipate a high number of retirements over the next 2 years in the fire department. Fire Explorer program, as well as recruitment committee, which will be attending career fairs at local high schools, colleges, vocational schools, and community events to attract applicants. The value that this academy will bring: maintain our Class 1 service delivery. Department would be reflective of our community and attract diverse local youth to fire service. It will be funded out of general fund in tune of $1.3 million. I briefly mentioned a couple of upgrades at 2 of our fire stations. The plan to proceed with these upgrades is first a facilities master plan to include gender accommodation, and this would allow the department to fully access the structural needs and deficiencies in fire stations while also allowing for gender accommodations. System-wide facilities assessment. Fire Station 27, as I mentioned, additional dorms for ambulance operators, allowing a 24-hour ambulance resource in the district, and Fire Station 24, restrooms for gender accommodation. Values that it will bring: enable fire station to be more inclusive of multi-gender firefighters, enhance wellness and living conditions of current and future firefighters, help to attract the best talent at all ranks throughout the organization, and make fire stations more accessible to the community. The new appropriations that we're requesting is $350,000 for Fire Station 24 restrooms and another $350,000 for Fire Station 27 ambulance operator dorms. And the funds will come out of Capital Improvement Fund, Measure S. This is a carryover of $3.4 million for fiscal year 23-24. It will be an additional $700,000 out of Capital Improvement Fund Measure S. Next highlight is the enhanced response readiness. How they plan on doing it is with the addition of the proposed 3 firefighter paramedics plus additional response unit according to latest statistics, the department has had 1,773 increase in incidents year over year, which represents an 8.8% increase, especially with new multifamily developments and attractions to downtown Glendale that Chief Sid mentioned. We believe it's critical to address our resource model. The value it'll bring is enhance our readiness and response capabilities for emergencies, improve response times, add additional response resources to downtown Glendale area, ensure appropriate resources and personnel are always available for the residents and visitors in case of emergency, and this will be funded out of general fund for the fire department. Next is the expansion of fire department fleet. Fire department fleet, as you know, utilize emergency incidents 24/7 basis. And as I mentioned, with the increase in the incidents, the wear and tear on the fleet causes additional wear and tear on the fleet that they utilize. And with the assessment of mileage, ensuring uninterrupted services and maintaining Class 1 delivery model, and to ensure safe and reliable transportation for our first responders and patients, there is a critical need to replace old fleet with new purchases. How will it be done? The proposal is to replace 2 fire engines, 5 ambulances, and 6 utility vehicles. The values they'll bring: provide for uninterrupted emergency services, again, continued Class 1 service response delivery, increase safety and reduce risk, and eco-friendly battery-powered rescue equipment. That concludes the presentation on the fire department. Chief Ernst and his staff and the budget team are available for your questions. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Council.
Thank you, thank you. I think this time I'll start on on my right and go down. So Councilmember Kasakian, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. Well, obviously, one of the first questions I'll have will be about what overtime was spent in the fire department this last year, and if we have the numbers, how it compares to years prior.
Thank you. Let me start with
And
good
thank
morning.
you, Chief, by the way, and to your staff for everything that you do.
Good morning,
Preface with that.
Mayor Brotman, council members, Councilmember Kasakian. To answer the question specifically on overtime, I think we need to make sure we always keep in mind that there's a difference between true overtime and constant staffing overtime in the fire department. I think, as you know, we have a set limit of firefighters and paramedics that we keep on duty every day 24/7 so we can have a constant level of service to the communities. That said, the normal CTO rate for most fire departments is someplace between 25% and 30%. So based on all their other accrued MOU leaves, 25 to 30% of the time, most firefighters are off on one of those leaves. Our numbers are a little bit lower than that. I don't have the exact percentage, but that's what will account for a lot of your normal constant staffing overtime. Last year, as it turns out, in fiscal year 22, our total overtime budget was $8.4 million. Our current this year is $6.9 million, so we're actually at a little bit of a higher rate than we were at last year. The reason for that is work comp injuries. We currently have on the average of 6 people that are off on long-term work comp leaves. Other than the constant staffing overtime, we have approximately $100,000 of true overtime, and that overtime is used for mandatory trainings. When I first met with you, I think we talked about some of the recruitment gaps that I saw in the Glendale Fire Department, where a lot of the recruitment was done by volunteer firefighters on their off time. That unfortunately does not bring the number of candidates in that we need in today's world. I think has been discussed. Chief Sid had mentioned, we've talked about it with HR over the course of the last several months. The numbers coming into fire departments and police departments, and probably most civil service departments, are not what they once were. So with that, our recruitment efforts have to be beefed up. When I came onto the job, I met the two individuals that did the majority of that volunteer recruitment for the fire department. I asked them to put together a strategic plan to identify where all the core events were over the course of the year so we could start to budget a set amount so I could actually pay them to know that we're going to have people out doing effective recruitment. Part of that recruitment is not just for incoming firefighters, it's also for what our bigger rotating door is, and that's our ambulance operators. So that currently is set at about 100,000. So aside from the recruitment piece, it's also the mandatory training piece. You might ask, why can't we do our mandatory training on duty? Again, so that we don't continue to impact that on-duty baseline of firefighters. There are certain courses which we cannot send people to during the course of that training day. For example, we have state-certified arson investigators, really an important specialty to keep trained up and certified. But those numbers had started to fall off at about the time that I came on the job. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is keep two certified arson investigators on every single day. And I'll just give you a real quick story. Probably 6 months ago, we had a fire in a elderly residential care building. As it was found, the fire originated in the closet of an elderly person's room. There is no logical reason for a fire to start in the closet of an elderly person's room in a residential care facility. Unfortunately, without having certified arson investigators, the cause determination is left to people that may not have that specialty level of training. So it's really critical to me working with the police, and although the police investigators did take part in that, they may still even have a gap in some of those specialty levels of training. So there definitely is a need for some of those required levels of training and recruitment and things that do end up with that overtime rate. I think those numbers are fairly consistent, have been year to year. It's not overtime that's given for anything that could be done on a volunteer basis. So if we do send someone to training, for any training that might be related to a future job need, for example, we don't normally pay people for those. It's only for those department trainings that where I need to have someone that's certified to a certain level for a specific project, urban search and rescue, hazmat, arson, some of our EMS specialties that we have to pay people to go because they can't actually get that training during that normal 48-hour time that they're on duty.
All right, thank you. In terms of building and safety, I know that there's been a lot of construction activity. Your department has a significant role in making sure that plans are carried out with the safety of the structure in mind, and also there's been in recent years, more attention to those safety issues, given some of the incidents that have happened. There was an incident in Oakland, I can't recall the name of it. It was maybe the Ghost Ship fire. So I understand the importance of making sure that the buildings are constructed safely and meeting all the guidelines. But there's also been one property owner that I think has reached out to us a few times. I think it was Mr. Stepanian, RM Stepanian, who's raised the issue of having certain certification requirements go above and beyond what can be done routinely by property owners who eventually will assume most of the liability of that. Are we looking into how we can perhaps reduce the costs or some of the bureaucratic red tape in those routine inspections?
Yes, sir. I guess if you were to ask about the bureaucratic red tape part of that, I would say I'm always looking for efficiencies, and if we can cut bureaucratic red tape, that's an efficiency that I would look for. I'm also careful, though, to make sure that we don't incur additional risk to the city.
Sure.
And I'm sure, as you know, we prescribe to the fire code, which the entire state of California prescribes to. A lot of those regulations are set by the state, and once we go and break from that, I think we lose some of the liability protection of having accepted the entire fire code. I know that our fire marshal has looked in depth at the issue that Mr. Stepanian brought forth. I know that the previous fire chief has looked at that issue. In looking at all the previous notes from that, I don't see any place where it would be prudent for us to veer from the fire code and make an exception, because we make an exception for that type of inspection. Unfortunately, I think then it opens the door to what other parts of the code can we make an exception for. It would be similar to someone saying, well, it's safe to drive down a certain street at a certain speed, even though the mark speed by the normal vehicle code is such. I don't know that it would be prudent for us to break a vehicle code regulation, just like I don't think it would be prudent to break some of those fire code regulations.
I appreciate that. The only reason I would, what I would counter with, Chief, is that during COVID, we all learned how to use technology to levels of efficiency that we didn't think was possible before. Whereas meetings were required face-to-face, all of a sudden students were learning over Zoom. And there were actually some even building inspections and site visits that were being done over Zoom and other, I don't know if it was being done in our agency. I know other agencies were doing it. So if technology can be used to have an inspection done versus someone making an appointment, having to go down, having to actually physically be there to look at it when the same goal can be achieved via video conferencing, then I would urge us to look into that to be able to have some sort of cost savings and help to the property owners. I know that the costs of it do add up over time. I'm not a property owner of multiple units, but those who are, and especially the smaller quote-unquote mom and pop owners, do seem to indicate that this is a cost that is impacting their bottom lines given the difficult couple of years that they just came through.
Yes, sir. And if
yes.
I could just close at one point, just to let you know that I have set up a meeting with Mr. Stepani, and even though I know he's talked to the previous fire chief and the fire marshal, I will hear him out and get any additional facts he may have so that we can come up with a current and final decision.
Sure. Thank you. You know, I do have other questions, but I think some of it was already touched upon. I want to give my colleagues a chance to ask theirs, and if there isn't, if those questions aren't asked, Mr. Mayor, I'll reserve some time at the end to
appreciate it.
ask other questions.
Okay, Councilmember Satrian.
Thank you, Chief.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm really happy to see the facilities upgrades in there. I had the opportunity, for those that don't know, had the opportunity to spend half a day or 10 hours with one of our, at one of our fire stations, and then had the opportunity to visit the other facilities. I'll say that the conditions in which I found our facilities was extremely concerning to me. And I think it highlighted, at least for me, why we've had a difficult time, especially hiring women firefighters. As somebody that can rough it, I've said this, I would not feel comfortable working at our facilities. Many of our facilities don't even have doors. There's curtains where our firefighters are sleeping. The bathroom, shower situation is just awful. And so I'm happy to see the facilities in there, but I want your input on, you know, what are some mitigation points we can do until those requests come in and are completed.
Thank you, Councilmember Satrian.
And if that's included in the
think-
budget.
I'm sorry?
If that's included in somewhere in the budget, whatever you're gonna respond with.
Thank you. It is, and I think it's included in two places, and it would be under CIP for this year as well as CIP funds that were unspent from last year. And if you remember back when we first met, we talked a little bit about recruitment of women, so that is absolutely one of my priorities. Looking at fire department facilities, it's not a unique problem, the issues that you brought up to our city. Unfortunately, it happens in a lot of cities because the majority of the budget will go to our most visible side, which is going to be the response side, and sometimes we do forget some of the support side. On that, what I'm currently doing is I have 5 different consultant proposals on my desk today that by next week I will have decided on, so we can move forward with a consultant study to look at 3 different things. We're going to look at a standards of coverage for the city of Glendale. The standards of coverage looks at, based on population density today and anticipated population density, do we have the proper resources and personnel on duty to cover the city? We're also looking at a fire station assessment. Again, based on what we see our needs are in 5 years, can we house additional firefighters? Are the firefighters in the right places in the city, in those stations, to properly respond to where the bulk of those calls are? And I'll share with you that today, we don't have one bed in one fire station that is not filled with a firefighter. What that tells me is, in 5 years, if it turns out the population density increases and I need to put 3 more ambulances on the street, I don't have places today to sleep the personnel for 3 more ambulances, so we are bursting at the seams. So the facilities issue is much more than just a maintenance issue of our existing facilities. It's looking at a long-term plan for what do we need moving forward. So I'm hoping with this consultant study that will identify both what our short-term issues are, gender-based, as well as all of our longer-term issues for putting the right number of people onto the streets and into fire station facilities.
One of the things that we talked about, but I really don't see here, and I'd want us to consider as we're going through this process is, you know, we've been talking about recruitment and how we diversify or provide support to be able to both recruit and retain individuals that are in our fire department or in our training programs. I believe that there's some opportunities for us to send some of our folks to paramedic school. Can you speak on that?
Certainly. As I'm sure the council knows, our ambulance operator program was first put in place as a cost-saving method, so we didn't have to put paramedics, sworn firefighter paramedics onto ambulances, and also as a recruitment method so that we could take some of the local youth, pull them into the program on an hourly basis, and use that as a secondary pool. So we still have an open hiring pool, but then we also have the internal promotional pool for those hourly ambulance drivers. The difference there being ambulance drivers are EMTs, emergency medical technicians. Everyone that's on our heavy apparatus is paramedic certified. That's where that additional cost comes in. So as a recruitment tool, the AO program has been extremely successful. 25% of our existing staff in the fire department came up through that ambulance operator program. So it's definitely effective. As far as a business model, I'm still looking to see whether it's the most efficient business model because there's a rotating door of those young folks in and out, because usually within the first year we lose about 50% of all the people that come in because they're hired by other departments. So how can I address that and use that as a recruitment tool? We see more incoming females through the AO program than we do through the standard open hiring firefighter program. If there was a way that I could take those candidates, especially female candidates that are in the AO program, and benefit them by being able to put them through a paramedic program before they're actually on salary. So while they're still hourly, I don't have to pay them to go to paramedic school. That way, when those people come back, it would increase our pool because they already have a relationship with the Glendale Fire Department. We've had conversations with the city attorney's office already. Would there be a way, if we made that investment in a candidate, would there be a way that we can secure that investment? LAPD had a similar instance, this is probably now 15, 20 years ago, where they saw that a large number of their early recruits were going to other outside agencies. They actually developed a contract where they were able to tell the recruit, if you leave within, I think at the time it was 18 months of getting into the field, you have to pay back your recruit times. Because paramedic school is not a core function of that salaried EMT, the city attorney had the opinion that we would be able to come up with an agreement with them that if they did leave before a certain period of time, and we would work that into what our normal hiring schedule was, we would be able to recoup that money. So I see that as a safe investment to place in these young people. There still would be a process in how we would pick the ones that would be most eligible for success in the firefighter academy. But that way we could provide that training and use that as probably a much more targeted recruitment tool than we're seeing through the normal open hiring of firefighter paramedics, especially of the female gender.
So each of those, if we did fund that, would be about 15,000?
15,000 per person if we're not paying any salary costs.
Okay. You know, I think that if I'm...
I was just going to ask if you had a lot more because I'm conscious of the time. You want to finish this?
Sure. I'd like for us to consider as we're going through the budget. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money here. It's 15,000 per person. How many would you need?
That's all a matter of attrition. So I would estimate if we could look at, and let's call it a scholarship for the sake of discussion, if we could look at a scholarship of 4 to 5 people per year, keeping in mind it takes a certain amount of time to put a person through paramedic school, and there's not always a 100% success rate. So that's roughly a 6-month program from start to finish. If we put them in that, and if we looked at approximately 4 to 5 per year, we may see half that in successful candidates that might make it into our pool for hiring.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Go ahead.
I want to continue on that topic. You said that city attorney, yeah. Did you okay this recouping the training fund? Am I
Your
to
mic.
understand that, or?
Correct. As long as it's a cost that is not required for the position, it is something that we can try to come up with an agreement to recoup those funds.
And that would be the 15,000?
Correct. Is that
In
the
this
cost?
case, if we were just looking for the cost of school, it'd be 15,000 per candidate.
Okay, so they would have to sign this agreement, and what was the refund based on? Them paying back?
Them staying a certain amount of time. Our concern is always that we would provide training, and there are so many bigger agencies with higher initial salary rates that I don't want to put someone through paramedic school and then have LA County or LA City
Right.
snap them up. So that would hopefully retain them for a certain period of time till we could go into an open recruitment and hiring process for firefighter paramedics.
And if they don't sign that, then they have to refund the scholarship?
Yeah, or if they
the-
sign that and they leave inside that
In that-
set period of
okay.
time, that they'd have
Okay.
to reimburse the city.
I think that's a good idea. We've been trying to get that with the police department, with all of the department, with both safety, police and fire. They would sign like a 5-year contract, but we've always been told that that was not legal. But now I understand this is a different situation. They're
Right,
not on
'cause
salary.
Right. The
Yeah.
problem is often in those other circumstances, if it's a training that we are requiring them to have,
Right.
you can't, by law, you can't require reimbursement.
Okay,
We're looking at the-
that's interesting.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, members of City Council, just procedurally, as I see that 2 council members are interested in this program, as we come back the last study session
30th.
for wrap-up, we'll provide some additional data for your consideration and direction to be included in next year's proposed
If
budget.
that data can include looking at that 4 to 5 range that the chief was talking about annually. Thank you.
Did you say in your presentation, Chief, that the part of the explanation for overtime was leaves that are mandatory? Did you say that by I don't know if it was the state fire code or?
Yes, no, if we look at constant staffing, because we need to have a certain number of firefighters, in our case, we have 50 sworn people on duty 24/7 every single day.
Okay,
For those folks, because of all their normal MOU leaves, SK, or sick time, vacation time, injured time, 30% of the time, in some organizations, usually it's between 25 to 30% in the fire service, 25 to 30% of that time, a person is using some form of their own MOU leave. Because we have constant staffing, when that person is off on vacation, sick, injured, we have to hire someone overtime into that position so that we have that constant level of coverage for the city.
wow, okay.
And those
Yeah.
are, unfortunately, those are common numbers nationwide.
Okay, okay. Page, let's see, 19 and 20, or 18 and 19, where you mentioned that the increase in funding is due to rising salaries and benefits. Why is that? Hazardous disposal, and you mentioned fire communication, that the increase in the budget was due to salaries and benefits?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Councilmember Devine, yes, that's the majority of the reasons why the costs have gone up. Just normal inflation and promotions and step increases will constitute that amount naturally and organically.
Okay, and that goes along with the MOUs?
Yes.
And if I may add that to your point, Councilmember Devine, the increases you see in the various departmental budgets do include all the previously negotiated MOU adjustment contracts with the various
That-
labor
that
groups. That's
explains
correct.
that. And going back to the need for upgrading in the fire stations, do I understand that you are, as I understand it, there are a lot of needed upgrades in more than just, what, Fire Station 27, was it, and 24?
Yes, correct.
Are those, is that also in the budget, or is that what the consultant is going to be
That's
looking
what
at
the
so that we
consultant
can
will be
put?
looking at. So I haven't budgeted for what I expect to come out of the consultant study. This consultant study will probably take between 4 and 6 months. So I would anticipate with the captured CIP money that we have from last year, which we've currently put on hold, the $700,000 that we've identified for the 2 upgrades to gender-friendly facilities at 2 fire stations, that will get us started in what I expect to see as probably some of the priorities in that fire station assessment. Next year, when I stand in front of you, I will probably have a much more robust plan for what I see as our 5-year needs, and we'll start to break that up into our 5-year plan.
And then, City Manager, if by chance this consultant says that these upgrades in the other stations need to be done, is that something that the chief can bring back to council and we can see if we can fund some of the upgrades?
Most certainly, Councilmember Devine.
All right. I believe that's it. No,
Okay, good.
that's
I'm
it.
sorry, but I'm trying to
That's-
push us
I know,
along
it's
a little
okay, it's okay. I'm good, I'm good.
Briefly, hi, Chief. So a few years back, we visited some of the classes in the Fire Academy, and it was a pretty rigorous day, just putting on the turnouts and climbing the ladders and all that stuff. So you announce an academy, you bring in recruits, and there are standards for their success.
Yes, sir.
Do you have different standards for their ages?
We don't have an age-based standard for incoming recruits anymore. Way back when I was hired, we did, but we no longer have that. If they can pass the requirements to get into the academy, and that's what's usually going to be the limiting factor, is being able to pass. There are certain physical requirements, and then unfortunately, if someone at an older, and I can say this, I guess, because I'm probably amongst that group, if someone of my generation started, they may be fit enough to make it through the initial test to get in. It's a very rigorous, as I'm sure you're aware, it's a very rigorous program and curriculum that many of them would just opt out early.
And that's why I haven't applied, Councilmember Najarian.
We
So-
will take you, though.
Do we have different standards for gender in passing?
No, sir, we do not. The fire service, in general, I would have to say, has one standard for male, female, for all candidates that apply. Different departments, and I'll just speak specifically for the department that I came from, they recognize that to meet some of their quota needs, and because back when I was hired, there were absolute set quota needs, they did have to change the academy curriculum. But currently in the city of Glendale, we have not made any curriculum adaptations to female versus male recruits.
Should we be?
That is something that I will be looking at further to look at the numbers. I have not seen what our current history is on past academy classes. I don't know how many females have started versus how many females have finished the academies. Those are things we will look at before starting the next academy.
Okay. I'm going to cut it at this point, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And I have a number of questions, but I'm going to drop most of them. I would just ask that, like I asked Chief Sid a few minutes ago, if we could do some kind of benchmarking to see where we are, how we stack up in terms of the resources and the outcomes with other fire departments. So that's not really a question, just mentioning that. I want to say thanks to the Tom Nicola, is it? Nicola? Yeah, the new emergency manager for pushing out CERT. I just learned that there's a CERT advisory or committee or steering committee, and that's great to see. And I would like to keep trying to get CERT training and CERT teams, not just the one-off training, but teams that kind of take on a life of their own, drill and do things like that in some of our other vulnerable neighborhoods. But it sounds like that's good stuff there is happening. And I know that some people went to this Beverly Hills thing.
Mobile integrated health.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I know this is kind of a more long-term type of thing, but at some point, I think I'd be interested, and we'll probably all be interested in hearing what you learned from that, and whether you think that's something that over the next couple of years we might want to try to consider. but I'm not going to ask for any kind of, it's already 11 o'clock, so we'll just move on. But thank you very much.
Can I ask a follow-up
yeah.
question on the CERT program? Is it possible to get something like that, have younger, I don't know is there an age limit to getting into that CERT program? Is there any way we can get it into somehow
Councilor
recruit
Devine,
high
if
school
I could,
kids?
just to remind you that in 2 weeks, Captain Nicola will be coming to council and giving a full presentation on CERT and any of our community outreach programs. So he probably would be the most well-versed in any of the specifics.
That's a good question. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Galani.
Sure. Thank you, Chief Ernst, and thanks to the support team that are present here that have helped put this budget together for the fire department. Appreciate you, Mayor, pushing the agenda to stay within time. Before we move on to GWP, we haven't done this before, but in order to be respectful of your time and the challenges that we've had with scheduling these sessions and reducing the number of sessions, budget study session, we've added GWP to today's session, including public safety.
And if I could ask you, and you do your thing I don't know that you need to read every word. I think we've all.
Trust me, I'm not.
We've all gotten
I got
okay,
a lot of words
okay.
here. I'm just picking and choosing. All right. GWP, personnel, 376.18 FTE. That includes hourlies. The department is requesting the addition of 2 electrical service planner position. This is, as you've heard, complaints from the community to help expedite the permitting process of spotting and installing new meters at a cost of each $173,000 fully loaded. The department is comprised of 5 divisions: admin services that oversees utility-related legislative, regulatory processes, fleet, warehouse operations, human resources, and safety program. Business services focused on modernization, security of business enterprises, critical systems, IT infrastructure, customer service, marketing, and public benefits. Electric services, essentially focused on safety and reliability of electrical infrastructure, service and delivery, power management, responsible for utilities initiatives, clean energy initiatives, programs and projects, and managing utilities resource portfolio. Similarly, water services responsible for maintaining safe, reliable water infrastructure, service and delivery, as well as water quality. Budget for the department, a total of $460, almost $5 million, comprised of 5 funds. Electric benefit fund, proposed increase of $1.3 million. I won't cover it here, but we have 2 or 3 highlights that includes the proposal for a new public benefit fund programs. Fiber optic fund, it's a small increase of $78,000 in the grand scheme of things. That electric works revenue fund, increase of $27.2 million. There's an $11 million increase in power purchase, salaries and benefits, including hourly wages, vacation, comp time, PERS, insurance, that's $4.7 million. And as I mentioned, 2 new electrical service planner positions, addition of $3.7 million in contractual services, transfer to general fund from electric fund, $3.6 million. Natural gas fuel, $2.8 million. Carbon allowances, $1.9 million. I'm just touching on the major items. That's offset by $2.8 million decreases, and the major item there is $2 million decrease in depreciation. Electric depreciation fund is a decrease of $3.9 million. This is due to less appropriation requested this year compared to last year. However, there are major projects that are being proposed. GWP Solar Design Build Program, 15 million. Grayson Demolition Site Improvement, 7.3 million. Conversion of 4 kV to 12 kV feeder, that's 7 million. And a $3 million for a mobile transformer that can be used and moved around from substations to substations as necessary. Fiber optics plan, 2 million. 1.5 million for upgrade and replacement of advanced metering infrastructure, AMI. Low carbon fuel standard program, 1 million, and transmission and distribution inspection program, another $1 million. Electric customer capital fund, no change. Electric customer repair fund, no change. Waterworks revenue fund, there's increase of 3.9 million. A couple of major items, 1.3 million increase in contractual services, 990,000 purchased water, salaries and benefits, another almost 400,000, offset by decreases as a result of repairs to office equipment, that's 200, and another 150 in other decreases. Water depreciation fund, small increase of 24,000. This is for CIP projects. Let's see, major projects here include pipeline management on Kenneth Road, $8 million, that'll be highlighted later, and well installation one on Foothill, $1.2 million. Water customer capital fund, no change. Water customer repair fund, very small increase, insignificant amount of $5,000. Quickly go through these department highlights. Fleet electrification study. Essentially, the goal is to conduct studies to determine what upgrades GWP system needs to accommodate fleet electrification and electric vehicles as was directed by council. Obvious values, cleaner fleet, lowering CO2 levels, increase in efficiencies of city fleet, and lower maintenance costs. Just for the study at this point in time, requesting 200,000 that comes out of electric depreciation fund. Solar energy battery development, this is to move forward with faster delivery, project delivery method, and we'll be leveraging Inflation Reduction Act for credits up to 30% of the project cost. Values, I'll bring DERs, local distributed energy resources, city on city-owned properties, and ability to charge batteries at Grayson in the future. This obviously aligns with council's adopted resolution. We have already started the bidding process on phase 1 and will soon start working on phase 2. Briefly mentioned conversion of 4 kV to 12 kV upgrades to our overhead electrical systems. We only are able to make conversion for 4 feeders on an annual basis. We need 40 of these, so this is going to take up, continue for the next 8 years or so. Essentially is to reconstruct feeders. For next year, it'll be around Tropical and Acacia substations. This will provide system reliability, more power flowing through our system, and upgrade of our power lines, electrical vaults, and that will also provide added benefit of more safety for our crews and customers. Pipeline management program, this is for water mains. This is upgrade of water main and fire hydrants on Kenneth Road. The method of communication with the customers will be postcards, emails, door hangers, text alerts during water shutoffs. Obvious values, improved system pressure and water for fire flow, water quality, water delivery system, and upgrading our fire hydrants. Another highlighted project is water reservoir inspection and rehabilitation. Essentially, the scope is to inspect interior exteriors of every tank and reservoir in the system, as well as access roads, and preparation of reports to prioritize the need, and the rehabilitation will be completed during the inspection program. The values, again, useful life of tanks, ensure water quality, and increase safety for employees and residents. Now, there are a lot going on that I need to cover here as far as public benefit programs concerned. That was it was brought up during the last year budget study session. This is a 2-year plan, goes through start July of this year through June 2025. Essentially, it's a plan to enroll folks in 21 programs for residents and commercial customers, and some of these programs are provided by private vendors. The others require applications for qualifications, especially for low-income customers. This will help customers save energy, offer rate assistance to low-income customers. The public benefit program includes 5 programs for low-income, 11 energy efficiency and savings program for residential and commercial customers, 3 modernization programs, and 2 sustainability programs. If you like, Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, I can quickly mention the name of these programs, and if you have additional questions, staff will be able to respond to them.
Well, let me ask you something first. Is this 2-year plan something that we're approving as part of this budget process, or is this 2-year plan something that's going to come to us for a deeper dive?
The process, Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, the hope is that this will get approved as part of the budget process for 2 years.
Okay, if that's the case, I know, at least in my case, I'd like to do a deeper dive. I'd like to really see what the guts are, what programs we're offering. This is too kind of high level for me.
I can, again, I can walk you through the programs. I'll be quick. I'll speak as fast as I can, but if it's the council's desire, we can schedule another meeting to go over the details of this public benefit program.
I'd actually like to see that as well. So I don't know if we need to do it, if the rest of the colleagues, if we need to do it offline or we need to do
Yeah, maybe through briefings or.
Yes, that's a good idea, but if you don't mind, for the benefit of the public.
Yeah, we can go over some of this.
Right. And then we'll go over the details during briefings and then come back as part of our wrap-up to get direction from you.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thanks.
So, very quickly, new 5 low-income programs, refrigerator exchange program for $350,000, reduce energy at home program. This is a new program. Previous one was new as well. $400,000. Low-income bill discount for senior care and Glendale Care. This provides customers, low-income customers, a $17.50 monthly discount or $35 per bill. Helping Hand, Guardian, 11 energy saving programs, early replacement and electrification of HVAC units. This is a pilot program, $150,000. Refrigerator and freezer recycling program, $70,000. Smart home energy and water savings upgrades, $170,000. Smart home rebates, business energy solutions, online store for energy efficiency and water measures, home energy reports and online platform services, tree power, this is for shade trees, in-school energy and water conservation education, and a rate engagement tool, this is new for following year, 24-25, and business customer engagement portal, again, for 24-25. Plus 3 modernization programs, starting with peak time of use energy monitor and app, smart home displays and smart thermostat program, and behavioral demand response program proposed for 24-25. Two sustainability programs, set aside $300,000 for potential new programs, as well as solar schoolhouse that provides GUSD and local private schools with photovoltaic training and activities for teachers and K-12 solar education program. Continuing with public benefit program, just wanted to highlight low-income energy efficiency. This is to conduct a survey and install energy water efficiency measures in customer homes and determine eligibility for refrigerator exchange and swap out of old refrigerator for a new Energy Star 1. Values, two new energy efficiency programs. This will be for local low-income residents to reduce energy at home, and obviously refrigerator exchange. This will help customers save energy and cost. And last one is residential energy efficiency. This is to screen the operational efficiency of existing HVAC units, offer replacement with the new Energy Star rated units, and offer customers with rebates. It'll help customers save energy. Older units are more expensive to operate and maintain, and provide financial incentives for contractors and rebates for customers. That wraps up GWP presentation. Staff from with Mark Young, General Manager, and his support staff, other departments are available to respond to your questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll start at this end now.
Pass.
You're going to pass?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Devine.
A couple, nothing was mentioned about electric charging stations. Are you planning on increasing those numbers? Is that in the budget?
Yes, ma'am. We're continuing that program. We just felt that we would highlight different programs. This program is going to continue.
I think the programs highlighted are pretty amazing and robust, so good luck with all of those. The mobile, did you mention a mobile transmitter? Do we have that now, or is that a new program?
No, we don't. What it is it's a tractor trailer with a transformer on it, so that if something happens to a transformer at one of our substations, we're able to bring that trailer to that substation, hook it up so that we can minimize the effect of the distribution system.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea. It seems like we have a lot of that going on, don't we? Yeah, transformers explode. What's the cost on that? What's the funding cost, the budget on that one?
I believe 1.3 million.
1.3? Is that for the mobile?
Yes, and just to be clear, it's not the transformers that are on the pole, it's the transformers that are in the substations. They're very big transformers. The lead times can take up to 2 years for them. So by having this mobile trailer with the flexibility of being able to go from 34, 5, or 69 kV to 4 kV or 12 kV, we can put them in there and allow us to be able to withstand that lead time on having to purchase. These transformers are not something that you can just buy. They're not something in stock. They have to be built, and the lead time is 18 months to 2 years.
Okay, very good.
Councilmember Devine, clarification, it's a $3 million price
3
tag.
million. Okay, might be money well spent. Thank you, that's all
That's it?
for me.
Okay, Councilmember Salter.
So I'm just going to keep it to one.
Well, we're doing good on time now,
We're
so
good.
we
We're good.
spent
We have time. I'm out of breath, but we're good on time.
Leave all the time to you.
No, I don't think it will.
I know that we don't have the numbers now, but I'd like to see how much is in the budget for EV charging. I know I had initial conversations about potentially creating private-public partnerships for the EV charging stations moving forward. I would love to see, as we're progressing through the budget sessions, for us to see how much money we would actually save or actually make if we were to move in that. I know that a lot of other cities have this, and I don't believe that we also need to be the only ones that are investing in this to ensure that we have proper EV charging stations moving forward.
Councilmember Sartran will include that as in the wrap-up session, the
Okay.
information you requested.
And then I think I would have a lot more after we do the briefing for the public benefits program. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kasakian.
I will echo the concerns and desire to have more, a broader network for the electrical vehicle charging and to continue with that. Ultimately, what I'm looking for us to do is prioritize within water and power the need for more solar on homes, businesses. It looks like you are already moving in that direction, but I want to encourage all efforts to even carve out a specific task force within your department to focus mainly on that. And those are my only comments right now, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. I think Chief Sid kind of made a strategic error by choosing to go first. Because now we're all wiped out. And
That was my plan. It was a coin toss.
okay. So so the 4 kV to 12 kV, I think I know the answer to this, but what prevents us from doing more than 4? Is it money? Is it linemen? Is it our labor agreements? Disruption to the grid? What would you say? Because I think we've talked about this, and the faster we can get there, the more efficient our system is, and fewer line losses, and more stability, and all those good things.
So I agree with you. I think all the reasons that you mentioned are appropriate. The idea of going from 4 kV to 12 kV is that the amount of current that flows through the line gets cut by a third. That allows you to be able to transfer more energy on the existing lines without having to rewire the distribution system. So for those people who don't know what the idea of going from 4 to 12 kV is, the importance is it allows you to have 3 times more energy capacity in the distribution system. So what happens is if we have a 4 kV line, we have to, 1, do the engineering. 2, we have to then purchase the transformers to allow us to update the 12 kV. There's a different spacing between phases. So the lineman would have to go up the poles and move the wires on the poles. They have to put new transformers in, and they also have to do the engineering work. So we're doing it at a pretty fast pace. And when we said that there was 4, that's 4 by the contractors, and we're trying to have 1 feeder per year by our linemen, so that the linemen are staying invested in the upgrades. So between that and the engineering work, it seems like we're pushing maximum density on our crews and our engineers to be able to perform that task.
Okay, but we'll be able to get through it all. You say an 8 or?
We believe it's an 8-year program.
8 years.
And I think as things start to progress, and we'll be into our 2nd year with the contractor, we'll be able to start streamlining. We'll be able to start combining feeders, like Howard Substation is a 4 kV feeder. If you had Tropico and Rossmartin at 12 kV, maybe you can assume some of Howard Substation's load, so you can start to consolidate loads onto different feeders, and maybe you can retire a 1920s substation. So we're looking at doing that. I feel good about doing that. I think the infrastructure also with underground vaults and having to replace we have a pole replacement policy. The poles are very old, so right now we've gotten a lot of flack for having drones looking at our poles to see about the life expectancy of these poles. So we were shocked at some of these, so then we had to start spending time and effort in replacing poles. So not only do you have to put the transformers on, you have to replace the poles. So this whole upgrade starts a can of worms that starts to permeate into underground feeders and vaults, and so I think we're doing a very good job. So we're anticipating an 8-year program. Okay,
thanks. Next question is about changing to LED lighting on our streets. Can you just give us an idea of where you are, how many years to go through that, and also why we keep having this issue where we put in like really, I don't know what you call it, but lighting that people get upset about, and then we have to go in and we have to change it to something that's softer. Why aren't we just putting the softer stuff in at the get-go?
So I believe as the streetlights start to progress, as the maturation of the streetlights, you have different color streetlights, you have different intensities of streetlights. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to standardize where we come up with a standard color. So if you had a streetlight with an incandescent bulb, and then you come up with a fluorescent light, it will be a brighter light that you might not be used to, and that's going to give you a better lighting of that area. So I see that it's a standard that we have to do, and we're very responsive to the neighborhoods that want certain colors. So we work with them to try to do that. But the illumination is done by a computer program to find out at what type of illumination on those poles that are required to have the appropriate light deflection down.
Well, can we get out to those neighborhoods first? Because I hear about these instances where we go out and we put something in, nobody knew it was coming, and then they say, wow, this is really bright, and then we go out and we replace them. Like, can we not do that?
I will definitely look into doing more community outreach on the lights, and I think going back and looking at them after they're installed to find out what the community thinks is probably a good idea. So we'll take that back to staff and direct them to go ahead and do that.
Okay. Then I want to ask you about, this CEC proposal. Where does that stand?
We're looking at it with our contractors to take a look at what the CEC requirements are. I can't give you a definitive answer on that right now, but we are definitely looking at it, and we definitely have consultants looking on our behalf to maximize that ability, and we are aware of it.
Okay. Is there a time limit? I mean, I know there's a bucket of money, and we want to get in there, and Councilmember Kasakian and I had a call with the vice chair, I think it was last year, and he said, there's money for us, but we have to put in a good proposal. So are we going to do it?
We are going to look at it, and if it's appropriate, we are going to do it. One of the proposals for the CEC was that they would want to put local generation or capacity in your facility if you can get it up in a year, because the California Independent System Operator is short on
Shovel-ready
RA.
projects.
And-
Essentially, they're looking for shovel-ready projects.
Right, and they need to have it up and running within a year. So obviously, our demo is going to take longer than a year, so we couldn't have it up and running. So cities like Modesto and Reading and IID, those are the cities that are capitalizing on that because they have plenty of space that they can go ahead, they have a green field that they can go ahead and generate. So we are looking for opportunities for us to be able to see how that can help us. But for the first 5 years, any of that capacity is going to be at the disposal to the California ISO, and we won't have that capacity. So theoretically, we would be building thermal generation or any other type of reserve adequacy for the disposal of the CAISO when we're deficient ourselves. So we're looking at opportunities the best that we can, but I know that that's a big push with the CEC.
But, I mean, I don't want to get into a whole lot of deal, but there were other things with demand response and vehicle to grid and things like that they were really interested in us exploring.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, and I know we'll get into the public benefit program. I guess I'd just say what I've said kind of a zillion times is I want to see, I'd like to see us shift more from giving fish to teaching how to fish, right? So the more we can do to create permanent savings for low income especially, and I see you're doing some of that, the energy efficiency. I would say that energy efficiency audit program that we have, I mean, I've taken advantage of that, but it's really lighting. It's really about coming in and replacing your light bulbs with LEDs, which is good, but I know that there are outfits that are doing, they do much deeper kind of energy efficiency analysis of your home and, identify opportunities for savings. So I'd like to see us do more with the energy efficiency audits. And then some of those, like replacement programs, like you mentioned, the HVAC and stuff like that, are those gas to electric? Are those electric to electric? I mean, I hope we're not giving incentives to put in gas.
No, I don't think so, but I would actually defer to the public benefits manager. He's very on top of all that.
Well, maybe we can cover that in a separate briefing. Okay, and community solar, which is another thing I didn't see here. I know you have some reservations about community solar, but I'd like us to look at.
I don't have reservations about community solar. I think that solar on city properties can be used as community solar. So I think that is a great first step, and I think the idea of moving in the direction of the first 8 in phase 1 gives us the ability to have a community-type solar where we can then broaden that to the disadvantaged communities. But I think what we need to do is build the infrastructure first and then provide an opportunity for a community-like solar project for the city residents.
Okay. And then I know, I think Councilmember Kasakian asked this question about kind of a clean energy team. What's the thinking about?
So we're in the
Mr.
middle
Mayor,
of negotiating.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, as you know, one of our assistant general managers left the city, retired. This provides a unique opportunity to explore what we can do with that section, and Mr. Young, his team, and I are working on coming up with a plan that will utilize resources that we have, and if there are additional needs for additional resources, will come to council, obviously, for approval. But we have several ideas that we're exploring. It hasn't fallen through the cracks, and we didn't finish the program because there's some research that staff's doing to find out the best structure that we can put in place, but it'll be something that we'll bring forward to council for approval, obviously.
Okay, but it's not in this budget.
We didn't make it in this budget, yes. So
I hope this budget doesn't restrict us from doing what I think a lot of us really want to see happen.
once this budget's approved, we have quarterly budget updates. If we can finish the plan by then we'll bring it to council for consideration. My hope is that it can get done by then. If not, for sure, the mid-year budget update. So this doesn't restrict you from adding or subtracting from the approved budget as we bring progress reports to council.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do you have, yes, Councilor
I have a comment on this. I think that provided that we're going to get a briefing on the programs, and then I do have additional questions on some of the other areas, and this is the first time we're seeing it. I'd like for the opportunity to maybe see if we can bring this portion back for us to discuss. So if we do have feedback or additional questions that it's answered, or tell me how you'd like to do that. So.
Definitely, Councilmember Sajian. As far as the public benefit programs?
Not just public benefit, but, I think there were a lot of questions posed here that forced me to have additional questions. And so
Okay. So the process, standard operating procedure is if there are questions that are raised at council level that we haven't been able to respond to because we need to do some research, then we'll come back, budget study session, and respond to those questions. I don't believe so far, at least for GWP, there's been questions that we haven't been able to answer. But as far as public benefit charges and programs are concerned, we'll schedule a separate briefing. I know there's a lot to take in, and I'm sure you'll have questions. And once those briefings are done, then we'll make it part of the budget approval process.
So I think it would be helpful, at least to me, if we, if I had the opportunity to go through the details that the staff went through today, and then I'm happy to do it offline, and then but our council colleagues should be getting the answers as well.
Definitely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Ajemian, do we have a caller?
Mayor Brotman, we do not have any callers.
I got a text from Herbert Milano that he was trying to get in.
I can reach downstairs to see what's going on, Mayor.
Said, waiting to speak on the budget, not recognized yet by call monitor. In the meantime, while we're waiting, let me just check, do we have any other final thoughts? Councilmember
Well, I
Zavoni.
just want to make one comment. First of all, I was really impressed this morning by our two new chiefs in their knowledge of the departments that they're fairly new at. I was incredibly impressed.
They stayed up all night, Councilmember Devine, and they were cramming.
I would imagine because, the knowledge of what's gone on in the past and what's going on now was pretty impressive to hear. And of course, I want to compliment Mark Young as well on his answers to our questions. I think staff today was very prepared and answered our questions quite nicely. So thank you all.
Appreciate that,
Thank you.
Councilmember.
Have we gotten him on?
Mayor, we still don't have him on.
Is he? I just. Okay.
Vote anyway.
No, we don't.
I gotta run. I budgeted a little
Okay. It
less
says,
time.
okay. I don't know what that means, not recognized yet by call monitor, but you've checked with GTV6 and they don't have it?
We're looking, Mayor Brotman, we're looking into it right now.
Okay, and no other final thoughts, comments?
No, we just, I think that, given that we went over $600 million worth of the city's monies in about 2.5 hours, seems like a lot when you're sitting up here, but I think that there's more to study, save some of those questions as we move forward. I know that Water and Power, with their strategic move going last, kind of avoided being grilled, but that doesn't mean, you may be out of the pan, but not out of the fire. So we'll have to revisit some of these questions. Thank you.
Okay. And if he's not on, we'll just,
Mayor Brotman, I'm getting something in right now.
okay. Well, what are you seeing?
Let's test it.
Nothing? Okay, why don't we,
We can test it right now, see if it.
okay,
he's on.
try, if he's not on, we'll ask him to email us and,
Mr. Milano, can you hear us? Herbert Milano, can you hear us? Mr. Milano, can you hear us?
okay. Okay, I think we made a valiant effort. Let's, just, if he's listening, to write to us and which he knows to do anyway and come speak, at the next opportunity. Okay, thank you. Can I take a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, before you
Oh,
do that,
sorry.
wanted, since you said other opportunities, wanted to share the future budget study sessions with you and the public. We just covered session number 2. Session number 3 will be on next Tuesday, May 16th. This would be, we'd be presenting the budget for central support departments. Next, Aram.
And by the way, I'm not here, so.
will not be here.
Our pro tem is Councilmember Najarian?
Councilmember Kasakian.
Oh, Kasakian, okay.
Yes, session number 4, Tuesday, May 23rd. Cover quality of life departments. There's community development, community service and parks, as well as infrastructure would include public works department. This is session number 6. What happened to 5?
Whoops. I apologize. It's a typo.
So session number 5 will be Tuesday, May 30th. We'll cover fee study and, as I mentioned several times, the wrap up to respond to your questions. And June 13th, budget hearing and request for adoption of the budget as proposed.
Okay, and I understand Councilmember Satrian's not here for the next budget session.
either.
But we still have 3, we still have a quorum.
Yes, we will have quorum, but let me check and see if we can reschedule that, but with all the challenges, we may not be able to reschedule it.
If it's, I don't want, I don't want this Councilmember Al-Satrian to necessarily go into what her plans are, but if it's possible to have her participate remotely, then that may be something worth looking to, because there's no action necessarily associated with the study sessions.
Okay.
Something to consider.
We'll take care of that. Okay. All right. So at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, and we're adjourned at 11:44 PM. Thank you.